Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight is part two of my conversation with Anita Whitney. Anita is an expert in the corporate government structure, which masquerades as representative government, which is designed to intentionally mislead the public in order to advance corporate objectives over the will of the people. I highly recommend everyone visit Anita's website, anticorruptionsociety.com, which is a wealth of information designed to help you understand how we are all governed and administered to by a system of corporate commerce and not the Constitution. Anita's site also contains a plethora of links, documents, and templates to assist you in protecting your rights under the contract-based system that has been imposed upon us and without our consent. And to kick our conversation off, Anita explains the premise of corporate charters and then how the contract-based legal system is embedded in virtually everything we do in our lives. And so without further ado, here's Anita Whitney.
I wanted to mention this thing about the corporation before we get too far away from it.
Yeah.
If you look at the corporate charter, and I don't know if you've ever looked at a corporate charter. If you look at a corporate charter, there's no acknowledgement of life in any way, shape, or form. So let's just take smart meters. If you get the Lawfully Yours guide, there is a notice for smart meters. And basically what we're saying is to the power company who wants to install this harmful device on your house, what we're saying to them, in your corporate charter, you have no authority to cause harm or injury to any living man, woman, or child. Okay?
Okay.
Therefore, should that occur, we hold you, and you name the officers, personally accountable, and both your professional and your personal capacity. What we're doing to the corporation is saying, we're not doing it too complicated, but just between you and I, we're saying, you're a legal fiction, you're about profit, you don't recognize life, and they don't. You're a human resource, you're a number, you're a date, you're a social security number. A corporate charter, corporations cannot recognize living beings, and they do not. None of their charters reflect any awareness that they can cause harm or injury to living human beings. And that has gone unnoticed for so long. No one is not challenging them to say, where did the state grant you authority in your charter to cause harm to living flesh and blood men, women, and children? If that's true, give me the name of the statute, give me the effective date, tell me when the state authorized you to cause harm. Now what we're doing is we're flipping it back on them and saying, well, yes, you don't recognize us as living beings because you're just a corporate fiction, you're just a piece of paper, but also you haven't got the authority to come and put detrimental products on my house that cause me harm or injury.
Right, as long as you define yourself as a real flesh and blood person.
Yes.
But they're looking at you as a corporate fiction.
That's right.
Right, it's corporation to corporation.
Correct.
So when they put the smart meter on, their game is, I'm putting the smart meter, I'm connecting it to that corporate fiction over there.
Right.
So the thing is, as long as people don't call out the fact that there is this huge, huge difference.
Right. Exactly, and that's what we've been ignoring for these many years.
Right.
We've been they write statutes for the corporate person, right? The corporate straw man person.
Yes.
Sometimes they call that person a customer, or they'll call that person a client.
Client, right.
Right, and you know this because you've seen enough of these documents to know that they have in their statutes these words. But these words do not mean... You can have a corporate client that's another corporation. The words do not mean flesh and blood living men and women. And if we don't make that distinction, that they don't have the authority to harm us, this will go on ad nauseum, Mike. I mean, this is part of the legal duality that has been created to allow them to function the way they're functioning with the living, which is you and me, because you've got the Hammurabi's law out there. Only equals can contract, so they can't contract with the living you. So they turn you into a corporate fiction, and that way it's corporations contracting with corporations. You are a customer. You
Right.
are a client. You are a student. Whatever they want to do. And we really have to wake up to this game. I wish I could wave a wand and the whole world would wake up and say, wait a minute, we're alive here.
It's so embedded, Anita. This has been going on for so long that people have been born and bred now for generations into this system.
Right.
And they just don't know any better. Let's face it. They're not teaching sovereignty. They're not teaching the Constitution in school. And this is all by design. This is so that you do not understand this. That the only system that you're going to understand, and you're going to have a weak understanding at best, is the system that you're in. We're not going to explain it to you. You're basically going to just live through it, trial and error. We're going to dictate how it is that you're going to live your life. And that's the thing that people don't get, because I will talk to people about this, and they'll say, going back to the beginning of the show, well, what difference does it make? How does it change my life?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. And you mentioned this. Okay, so how does the corporation do business? A corporation can't shake hands, it can't nod its head, and it can't say yes. It does business by contract law. It's one piece of paper, okay? The terms and conditions are on a piece of paper, which is not alive, it's just a piece of paper with writing on it. Okay, it has to function that way because it's not alive. So what do? They have us sign these contracts as if we're another corporation, and then they proceed to try to enforce it upon us. When you talk about what they don't teach us in school, one of the biggest deficiencies is the basics of contract law.
Right.
And anybody who's 18 is old enough to sign a contract in this legal fiction that the bar has created, and yet they don't know the first thing. They won't even teach them. They won't even teach them the very basics of contract law.
That's a very good point. I had an email exchange with somebody who had listened to a show that Sophia did, I guess, with SGT, and they wrote me and they said, hey, look, Mike, listen to the show, and, one of the problems that we have is that contract law is not taught. I said, I absolutely agree.
Right.
Absolutely agree.
I don't know if you got a chance to download Lawfully Yours, so we put it in there as an appendix. We're like, okay, here's the basics, and I really hope people get a chance to download that. If they read the whole thing, they really need the whole thing, but if they just start with contract law,
right,
and start understanding why they are consenting to the horrible things that are happening to them, and it's because they don't know it's all about commerce, it's all about contracts.
Right. It's almost like a negative confirmation. If you don't say anything, it's implied that you agree.
It is. In fact, that's how it's all set up.
Yeah, it's negative confirmation. Yep. Because you didn't say anything, you didn't speak up. I don't have an obligation. This is their approach. I don't have an obligation to really explain this to you and to tell you your options.
Right.
It's up to you to understand what it is that I'm doing and whether that you can opt out or not consent, whatever it may be. If you don't know, well, that's too bad. It's like what I tell people is, again, when I have these discussions, I said, look, when you get a credit card offer in the mail, it's always in lowercase, right?
Right.
Say Michael Williams. And let's just say I'm like, hey, you know what? I'd like to have that credit card. So I fill out their application, I mail it in. The next letter that comes to me, it's in all caps.
Right. Right.
Because they addressed the human,
right,
the flesh and blood, and they said, would you like to contract with me?
Right.
And as soon as you sign, because your signature is very powerful, and you sign and you say, okay, yeah, I want a BP credit card, whatever kind of credit card you're looking for, now you've just contracted, and then it comes back, it's all in uppercase. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because, again, when I talk to folks and I talk about the uppercase aspect of this thing, they just think, that's just the way the guy wanted to type the piece of paper. You're crazy.
No. That's not it at all.
The guy likes, he likes to type in caps. That's why your letter came back that way. I'm like, I'm sorry. I said, but that's not the reason.
Well, and this is why we have to, we're saying they're not following the Constitution. Of course they're not following the Constitution. Well, first of all, they put it on hold for umpteen years. And secondly, Anybody who doubts that can read Senate Report 93549. It's on our website, on the source document page, and see that it's been on hold since 1933. And even then, there's a question of how it had been subverted even before then. But this is all now about contracts. I mean, they brought UCC into every state.
Mm-hmm.
UCC is Uniform Commercial Code. They're all doing commerce. And when you interact with them, you're interacting with a commercial enterprise nowadays, and that's all they are. But if you sign and agree, then whatever rights you might have thought you had, you've signed them away.
Right.
And you can't complain because you signed it away.
As I said, your signature is very powerful. As soon as you signed away, that's it.
Okay, so now what do? Just in case you haven't heard this one, I think you have, without prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ever have a naked signature on any contract.
Right.
Sign without prejudice above your name. Now, some people say below, but an interesting interview that I heard, and she was right. She said if you sign below, they could cut off the bottom of the paper.
Well, they wouldn't do that, Anita.
So what that means, now what you're doing is you're signing that you're preserving your rights, because you know when you sign there are things implied in that contract that you are completely clueless to, that they're going to try to enforce on you.
Right.
Like when you register your child to school. They pass all kinds of rules about what the schools can and cannot do. Many of them you know nothing about. But if you register your child without prejudice, then you are telling them, I consent to anything you want to do.
Right. And the school's a corporation, by the way.
Oh, by the way, it happens to be.
So there you go. There's another contract you're signing.
Yes, and that's what we went through this with that California SB 277, and people were going, oh my God, I can't get my kid in school unless I do this and do that. So we put it on our Parents Against Mandatory Vaccines website, and we said, okay, here's what the statute said. It applies to persons as a pupil. Now, that's the very first sentence in that statute, person as a pupil. So then I go back and I said, okay, now go look in the statutory code of California. Right in the beginning, they give their definitions and what is a person. And lo and behold, it's a corporation, a partnership, a company. There it is. And why in the world would they require a corporation gets a vaccination, Mike?
Well, I mean, it's a money-making scheme, number one, but...
No, I mean, they wouldn't write a law for living flesh and blood men and women, children that would also apply to a corporation, would they?
Right.
When it comes to vaccinations. I mean, you look at the list of who it applies to, and you'd have to say, okay, you've got a puppy and you've got 8 rocks. Now, you're making a law that applies to what's wrong with this picture? Yeah. All these entities are dead, and you throw in one living entity and you're going to make a rule for both? And people still don't see it. I mean, I'm amazed. I'm like, how can they write a rule for a little boy or little girl that also applies to estates, trusts, companies, partnerships, limited life, blah, blah, blah?
Well, that in the same vein, Anita, a lot of people are running around today and saying, they're not following the Constitution. The Constitution is, the Constitution that, the Bill of Rights. The only thing that's come out of all of this, generally speaking, is that more and more people now are kind of looking at the Constitution and looking at the Bill of Rights. But what they don't understand is the Constitution that they think that they are screaming and yelling about is not the Constitution that's in place.
Right.
And I call it the organic Constitution. That's the Constitution for the people of this country. And the Constitution that's in place is the Constitution of the Corporation of the United States. And that's the other thing that people don't get. They're screaming and yelling. I don't understand how it is they can circumvent the Constitution and do an end run. It's because it's the Constitution of the corporation.
Right. That's correct.
They could do whatever they want. It's their guiding principles, if you will, as a corporation.
They own it.
They own it. They could do whatever they want. They could either adhere to what it says or they could say, hey, we don't feel like doing that.
Right.
right?
That's exactly right. And even then, that document of the corporation called the Constitution was suspended in 1933, which Senate Report 93549 will demonstrate when people read it. And in came all these 450 agencies for the corporation, the mother corporation in Washington. Now, none of that is in the original organic Constitution. Now they're making law via administrative agencies. And you're going, well, wait a minute, where does it say in the Constitution that an administrative agency can make law?
Right.
It doesn't. Don't you understand? This is not what is functioning today. And I get real tired of these lawyers. And part of this is the Bar Association. I think you and I talked about that. All of it is the Bar Association. They created this structure. They write the rules. When they're like SB 277, that was written by bar lawyers.
Yeah, they're the gatekeepers.
They're the gatekeepers. And they make sure it's worded exactly the way it needs to be worded. Okay? To fit this model.
Right.
Okay. But they don't tell you. Then you've got the bar attorneys in town telling us that, well, you have to pay for that sidewalk because the city corporation said you have to pay for that sidewalk. So then they're telling us that we have to abide by these because they're laws. Then we go in court and complain, and who's sitting behind the bench? A bar attorney.
Right.
And in the courtroom is an American flag with yellow fringe on it. And we have no idea what presumptions are in that courtroom when we walk in. And the attorney who you hire isn't going to tell you either.
You know, a lot of people don't understand the yellow fringe either. Could you talk about that? Because when I've had discussions with folks, they just think it's an ornamental flag. It's just somebody decided to put a yellow fringe around it, but it's all over the place. It's in the classrooms. It's in the courtrooms.
Right.
So what is the yellow fringe?
Well, and it has a presidential little hickey bob at the top. I thought it was called a filial, but Sophia couldn't find that word. I forgot to look it up, Mike. If you remember the word of the little thing that goes on the top of a lamp, it's a little decorative thing. Yeah, that.
Okay.
The one in the flags that you see has a presidential emblem, the eagle, at the top. So what you're going into is the military court that the corporation controls. And who's in charge of the corporation right now? The CEO is the president, on paper anyway.
Right.
So you're going into that corporate court controlled by the agency network of the president of the executive branch. And you're not told that. You're going into admiralty jurisdiction, basically. They're all in commerce.
It's the law of the sea versus the law of the land.
And I was just reading another interesting article on it, and he said they will tell you, they're not allowed to say it's admiralty court. So they've actually been instructed to never tell us that what we have is admiralty courts. So you know what they call them? You're going to love this. Statutory courts.
Yeah, statutory courts. There we go. Yeah. And if you bring up the Constitution, they'll hold you in contempt of court.
Yeah, because they don't have any jurisdiction. I mean, you're in an administrative court with uniform commercial code, and there's no Constitution in that room. They don't have the authority to deal with it. So there is a trap for you right there when you walk in the door. There is a trap set with that flag. Karen Hudis, who former World Bank attorney Karen Hudis, did an interview on the Rod Class show where she talked about her discovery that they turned her into a one-person corporation. And she couldn't believe it. She said it took her 3 days. She read it and read it and read it, and at first she couldn't believe it. Then she said, I finally had to admit it's true. I mean, everything I read, I finally had to admit it's true. And she's trying to find a way to get out from under it because she also is party to this mess. And she feels that the bar should disband because they are running a scam on the American public that is so horrific. They know there's a gold fringe flag. They know it's all about contract law. And she said, and they're never going to fix themselves. I thought it was interesting. She said it's up to the public to bring them down. And that's kind of what we're trying to do, expose the fact the bar built this mess. It was bar attorneys, and they are the ones that keep it in place and that implement it and use it against us.
You know, I have a quote. Actually, it was an interview that Alan West, a former congressman, I guess it goes back about 3 or 4 years ago. I did a show on Is the United States a Corporation back, I guess about a year and a half ago. And I put this clip in there where it was perfect. He says that the President of the United States, he's talking about Obama, is the CEO of this corporation called the United States. He says it.
Yes.
He says it. And the thing is, that's the other thing I tell folks, because when we get to this conversation again, they'll say to me, well, Mike, who knows about this? I said, I'm going to tell you right now, everybody who's in a leadership capacity in the House, in the Senate, the President, the Supreme Court, they all know. They all know. I mean, now, the lower level congressmen, that get elected for 2 years, the average Joe Blow happens to win locally, I don't think he has a clue. But those people that have been there perpetually, and in leadership capacities, they know exactly what's going on. And you tell me if I'm wrong here, Anita. And I didn't mean to cut you off there, but
that's okay.
The District of Columbia, I tell folks that will listen, it is a foreign occupying force. It is not part of the Republic of the United States. Essentially, look at it from this perspective. You are being governed out of a foreign country, from a foreign entity. It is a sovereign city-state.
It is.
And so the thing is, I tell them that, and they look at me, and they glaze over. What if we put the Capitol, the White House, and the Supreme Court in North Korea? Would you be happy about that? And then they go, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. That's not what's going on. You're just a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
You're getting nutty as you get older, Mike,
Well, I'll tell you, if you haven't had a chance to read Judge Dale's The Great American Adventure, I have to recommend it, because he really, of all of and I've read so many authors on this, my list of people who've been involved in trying to figure out what's wrong with this government is huge. I mean, they've been on the circuit, I've listened to hours and hours and hours and hours of people talk about this and what we should do with our courts, et cetera, et cetera. I like Judge Dale. He really made the light go off in my head, because he was the only one out of all of these men, mainly men, there are some women, Joyce Rosenwald, who brought home the fact that, wait a minute, it's a corporation. Think about what a corporation is. And all it can do is make rules for its own corporation. And those are what they're calling laws that are getting inflicted on you. And the only way they're doing it is by your unwitting consent.
Right.
And when he finally explained it and how the banks were involved in all of that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's what inspired me to put Lawfully Yours down. And a big part of that is Judge Dale's expose on how the courts work. But according to, did you read it?
I did read it, yeah.
What'd you think?
I loved it. I couldn't put it down. I downloaded it a few years ago, and for some reason, I found it in bits and pieces here and there.
Right. That's how it was distributed.
Right. So I would download part 1, part 2, and I was reading it. I thought to myself, this is unbelievable. In fact, you and I spoke offline, and I started thinking to myself, is he a real judge?
Right.
And I was trying to piece together what was going on here, but everything he was saying, it made perfect sense to me, and it's a great document to read. So, and you have it on your website in its entirety, right?
Right, and you can even buy it if you want to buy it and sit in a chair, on the porch or something and read it. You can buy it. I don't make any money off of it. If you click on the link to buy it, you'll be clicking on a link to a printer.
Yeah.
And he prints them out as the orders come in and mails them out. So.
Now, what does Karen think about what's going to happen? I watch her updates. I do. I honestly believe that she's an honest person. She comes across that way. I don't know her personally. I've never interviewed her. But she seems to be taking this on.
Yeah, she
trying
does.
to take the bull by the horns and trying to wrestle this thing to the ground. I mean, do you get a feel for whether she believes she's making progress, or is this such a behemoth that...
Well, I think she's coming from, yes, I do. First of all, the fact that she's willing to admit what we're talking about is huge. It's huge, and she gets bucket loads of points from me for that alone, because she was raised in an Ivy League, she was trained in an Ivy League school, and she was able to take this on, digest it, and then go out into the public and try to help explain it. That, she gets 5 stars, okay? Now, when it comes to the solution and the gold and all of that I don't really know.
Yeah.
She said something about why they set up the World Bank, which showed that she has been exposed to some indoctrination on her own. Because she talked about, so there wouldn't be currency wars, that at Bretton Woods they set up the World Bank so there wouldn't be currency wars, to benefit everybody. And I'm like, are you kidding? They set up Bretton Woods so that they could make the Federal Reserve note, which is the possession of the Rothschilds, the world's reserve currency. It had absolutely nothing to do with preventing currency war and had everything to do with him trying to get his currency spread across the planet, giving him more control than ever.
That's exactly right. That's what it was about.
Yeah, and she doesn't admit that. Part of that could be her indoctrination, though. She worked for 20 years, and we talked about that earlier. If you're going to work for Walmart as a manager, on some level, psychologically, you have to kind of believe in Walmart, right?
Yeah, and I've seen that throughout the alternative research, alternative media, Anita, frankly, where there are pockets or aspects of folks who are really trying to do good work where they haven't understood or perhaps haven't uncovered certain aspects which they've bought into, which are actually part of the matrix.
Right.
So they're still attached to that, but they don't really realize that maybe that they are attached to it, or they don't see that the attachment is problematic.
Right. You're right.
Right? So they're really good people, and they're doing really good work, they're heads down, but they still have the vestiges of some of this stuff still attached to them, and they haven't maybe, looked deep enough into the rabbit hole to say, hey, you know what? That's a problem too.
Right, exactly.
And
the whole Agenda 21 movement,
oh yeah,
you and I like talking about it because you and I were talking practically, on a practical level.
Right.
And we didn't talk about them violating our constitutional rights. Whereas some of the people in the Agenda 21 educational arena, and I don't know that that's Tom Weiss because I haven't heard him, are going out there saying, or Michael Shaw, they're violating the Constitution with this program, and we have tried to reach some of those people and saying, look, it's not a constitutional government that's doing this. And they can't see that, or they don't want to see that, or they're paid not to see it.
Yep.
And figure out which it is.
Yeah, and it's interesting how many people in the truth movement believe that there's remedy within the system because they don't realize that the system itself is completely corrupted.
Right.
It's been subverted, and I am still amazed at how many people believe that they can fix the system, and I keep telling them, look, that's never going to work. That system is in place to protect itself and to protect the people that have put it in place. You will get no remedy. You will get no correction.
Right.
Out of trying to force things through that pipeline. It's just not going to happen.
Don't sign a petition and don't send a letter to the legislature because none of those are going to work. In fact, I'm convinced, and I have this on my website, they use all those letters, they use all those petitions against us. Because, you see, when there's a lot of people who are complaining about something, they go back to the public relations department and say, we need to spin this better. People think this. Now, we need to stop them from thinking this and convince them that this is a good thing.
Well, what they use it for is,
Don't you think?
Oh, yeah, I do think that. And there's a number of things I think they use it for. That, and they're also taking a poll. When they do those things, that's like a poll. It's like, how effective is our propaganda? So, so if it comes back and it's cutting across the grain with where they want to drive the direction, they're like, oh, you know what? We have to just change around the manipulation and the propaganda because not enough people have bought into this. So we're going to have to make some changes. So they adapt.
Yes.
That's what they do. That's what that's all about. And when people say to me, aren't you going to sign the petition on the U.S. government website? I'm like, oh, yeah. Yeah. Why don't I just voluntarily put my email, my name, and everything else into their database? I'm already in enough trouble doing this radio show.
It's just a breath of fresh air to listen to you, Mike, because I've had those arguments up, oh my gosh, every day I get another sign this petition. And I mean, it wears me out. Even the referendum in California that's going on right now, supposedly to revoke SB 277, which mandates everybody gets vaccinated, all the children get vaccinated. I keep saying to them, that isn't going to work.
No.
What they're going to do is exactly what they did with the GMO labeling thing. They're going to use this as an opportunity to fight you by putting out more pro-vaccine information
Right.
all over the state of California. So what you're going to do is you're going to actually hurt yourself because you're going to have less people out there who will support you and more people who will be angry at you.
Right.
But you know what? I got nowhere.
Right, and I'm going to do this for the audience, so they'll be able to get the audio version of this. When they get your petition, they get all that stuff, this is what you're going to hear. This is what happens when they get it. That's it, okay?
And what we have found is by the time you're doing this and you want them to withdraw, I did my research on the pandemic and how they brought in pandemic laws in my state. There were never any pandemic laws in my state until 2003, and they used this anthrax attack as a reason why we had to have them. But anyway, I mean, I looked at this and I saw by the time I was aware, and they staged H1N1 pandemic, the money had already exchanged hands, Mike. The grants were already signed. The policies were already in place.
Right.
So what's going on in California? How much you want to make a bet that the public health, CDC gave public health a grant to do this, that, or the other, and the last thing they needed to get done was to pass the statute.
Yeah.
And people don't get that. It's going on from an administrative thing behind your back. And this little song and dance you see out here with the legislators, that's just a song and a dance.
Yeah, they're all actors in a play.
Yes,
exactly. You're watching a big theater production.
Right.
You know? It's like using 9/11 as an example. The Patriot Act was written before 9/11.
Correct.
And then
Absolutely.
After they finish it up and they signed it, they put their fancy seal on it and everything else. Like, okay, take the buildings down now.
Yep.
You
That's
know?
exactly right. And unless white hats come in and take out this corporate government, and we can't give up on that idea completely, you know, things could happen. In my opinion, and you can tell me what you think, our best hope to protect ourselves from this parasitism is to continually find ways not to consent and to use our energy exploring how it is we're consenting and how can we stop doing it. How we can demand accountability. If you're going to engage in a contract with me, by gosh, you're going to do it honorably, or I'm going to do my best to void it.
I agree, Anita. People have to get educated. They say knowledge is power. And once you have that knowledge, then you have to utilize it. You have to put intent behind it. And
Right.
You have to apply it. And this way you can live your life the way you're supposed to live it.
Right.
You know,
Right.
But a lot of people don't get, and they still don't get it. And a lot of people's lives are being ruined by this system, completely ruined.
Absolutely.
When we get asked the question, well, what's the difference? Well, the difference is under this system, you are not in control of yourself. You're not in control of your destiny. You're not in control of your life.
No.
On every single day that you wake up, somebody in this corporate apparatus is looking to undermine you.
Right.
They're looking to take money from you.
Right.
You go to work, and for every dollar you make, we're going to take 40 cents of it.
Now they're going to try to force vaccinate you.
Right.
With Healthy People 2020, they want to have, I don't know, something like 95% of the population, all age groups, fully vaccinated. And that scares a lot of us who are concerned about these dangerous vaccines, because we are concerned that they're going to connect them to the driver's license, that they're going to say, you know, if you're not vaccinated, blah, blah, blah. And that will mean that, in my opinion, I'm going to be spending, and probably you will too, more energy trying to figure out how to exit the driver's license trap.
Right. Well, and they're doing that. If you want an example, folks, I'll put this out there, Anita. Maybe you won't agree with me, but it's the same model that they're using with vets and guns. Some corporate administrator is going to say, I don't think that you, because of the drugs that you're on, should be carrying a firearm, so that we're going to recommend that your firearm license be revoked. Never mind the fact that veterans that are on these psychotropics, these drugs, they are on them because they were put on them when they were in the military.
Yes.
I know folks that are in the military and have told me firsthand that they're handing out those psychotropic drugs, those cocktails, like it's candy.
Yes.
And then these poor guys and gals, after taking, 2, 3, 4 of these a day for how many years,
Right.
they can't function. I mean, their mind is so clouded, it's so jammed up. And then when they go look for help, because they were told that these drugs are good for you. I mean, these things are going to help you function. So they don't understand what's going on with them. And then they're going to turn around and they're going to, it's problem reaction solution when you think about it.
Yeah.
They're going to turn around now and they're going to tell these folks, I'm going to take a right away from you.
Yes.
That's long-winded, but what I'm saying is I think that you're right. They're going to tie these things, forced vaccinations and so on, into everyday, daily functions that we have to engage in order to live our life.
That's what they're going to do.
That's what they're going to do, right? I agree with you. So if you don't get vaccinated, then you know what? You're not getting a driver's license.
So, instead of us always, and it seems like we're always shocked by what they've done, and then we're run to the Constitution. Well, they can't do that. And I can't tell you how many people say, well, they can't do that because it's not constitutional.
I know.
Instead of people, I'm trying to get ahead of this vaccination driver's license thing. You're trying to get ahead of this. We're trying to see where this is going to go and interject ways in which we cannot consent. I wish more people would start using their imagination in that way instead of sitting back saying, I'm not worried because that's not constitutional, therefore they won't do it.
But as a sovereign, let's just say as a sovereign, I'm not a corporate fiction. Why do I even need a driver's license?
Well, we've had that conversation in my very own home, and my husband has said, I'm not willing to drive without insurance. He's afraid that something could happen, and he would want the insurance to buffer, God forbid, and we've never had a serious accident ever, either one of us, knock on wood. If somebody got hurt or something, he's just very concerned about that. He does it for the automobile insurance, which you cannot get if you're not licensed.
Right.
Now, if he was given a choice between being fully vaccinated or keeping auto insurance, he'd probably let the auto insurance go.
What if you signed your license without prejudice?
Now, that's always, I think that I'm going to do that for sure, okay? I'd have to give that some thought. Where would that take you? Say they won't give you the license until you have the record of your vaccinations. Then you're right there at the counter, and now you're with a guy who's just following orders, and you're in a little bit of a battle. What would I do? I guess the first thing I would do is tell me where that's written, and I'd write it down. What's the statute? Blah, blah, blah.
And did I agree to it?
And then I would take that home and I would start addressing it from that point of view.
Yeah.
I would, first of all, in my state, and most states now, the Bureau of Motor Vehicles is a private corporation.
Mm-hmm.
They're not even related anymore to the state government.
So are the prisons.
Right. So now you've got a private corporation. Now that's a whole new battle, but that's the kind of battle we're going to have to fight, I think, Mike. How does this private corporation have the authority to tell Mike that he can't have a driver's license, which allows him not to get tickets? And, it's necessity. For most people, the ability to drive a car is under the law of necessity. So now we're going to have to challenge that. And I haven't thought about how I'd want to do that.
Well, it also implies that they own the roads.
That's correct. And if they own the roads, then why are we paying so much? So we can go down that path in the future. I think we're going to have to. I haven't given that much thought yet, but
yeah,
I can see I'm going to start having to think about that.
Yeah,
and maybe your listeners will use their creativity after listening to this program to think about ways we can handle this one too.
Yeah, and we're just chewing on things, folks. We don't have all the answers to this stuff, and I've put a lot of thought behind some of this. And for those that think that, we actually do have property that we own, If you own a home, as an example, you're paying property tax on your home. Property tax is a permanent lien against your property. And you can own your home free and clear, pay your mortgage off, and you're still going to have to pay that property tax. If you decide not to pay that property tax, you're going to be in for a huge battle. I'm not going to say you're going to lose it, win it, whatever it may be, but to date, people who have taken that on, I don't think anybody's ever won that battle, Anita, unless you know. In other words, what will happen is if you don't pay your property taxes and you own your home free and clear, they will come and not only take your property, but take the building that's on the property, which is your house.
I do know people who've won that battle. I know quite a few people.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
That's another avenue. And in fact, right now, we go back to that letter that I said to you. Show me what obligates me. What did I sign that obligates me?
Right.
To my knowledge, right now, the only thing that obligates me that I signed, okay, to the property tax was the mortgage. And it's right there in the mortgage.
All right. So once the mortgage is paid off, then that attachment is gone.
Then it comes time to ask what obligates me.
I see.
See, when I consented to do that as a condition of the mortgage.
Okay.
And I have a couple people I know who are in that exact position with me right now. Their property is paid off, and they're willing to say, let's start challenging this.
Mm-hmm.
What obligates us now?
And you know folks that have won this?
Yes, I do know people who have won this. Yeah, and I don't honestly, because when we get together, we talk about so many things, and that I was more interested in things like the vaccine and the courts and stuff like that. I do want to talk to them further about how it is they did this, because I do know people who have succeeded to get out from under that.
Yeah, because the way the system is set up, and really, if you're listening to the show, think about it. You're paying a property tax, which means it's a perpetual lien against your property, which means that you're renting your land.
Right.
You're renting it. You don't own your land. You are basically a keeper. You maintain it, you do this, you do that, but at the end of the day, the way they have this system set up, they can take it from you. And that's why I'm very interested in, for those that have succeeded in
yes,
getting that overturned, because that would be very, very instrumental.
Yeah. And it does say on your mortgage, most people on their mortgage. In fact, we were going to buy a property behind us that went on the market. And when we went to closing, they brought out the documents for, the mortgage and the promissory note. And on the second page, it said, I assign all property rights to the lender. All property rights, discounting your down payment. And at the time, my husband said, geez, that's interesting. And it was because it was like right in the front. So he starts reading it and trying to locate when it said we get the property rights back.
Okay.
We couldn't find it.
You couldn't. I was going to ask you, did you find it? No, so it wasn't there. Interesting.
What we did is we signed the document and we asked the people who work for the bank, the closing people, we had all the blue pens and sign here, sign there, sign here, sign there. We asked them, where does it say that? Oh, I'm sure it's in there. Well, so they took a quick look. Well, I don't know. I don't know where it is, but I'm sure it's there. So knowing that we had three days to withdraw, cancel the contract, we signed them all, took them home, and we sat down, both of us, with a fine-tooth comb, and we read every bit of that mortgage. And nowhere did it say that all property rights would be returned to us when we paid off the loan.
That's unbelievable.
So we rescinded the thing. We said, this is ridiculous. Why would I pay a mortgage and give you the property rights? Pay a mortgage.
Because you're generous?
I mean, really.
You don't need property.
I know. So we went to another bank thinking, okay, this was a flex. We still wanted the house. So we go with another bank, and we learned a lot. We learned that they won't show you the contract up front before you make application. They will not give it to you. So you're not able to see the terms and conditions of the mortgage before closing.
Yeah.
Okay, but this time we thought we were smart. Oh, we're smart, right? You always say, oh, I'm smart, I can do this. So we said to the agent, the loan processor, all right, we would like to know if we get all property rights back when we pay off the house. Oh, I'm sure you do. She said, I'm sure you do. I said, okay. So now we go to closing the second time. And we take the paper home and we look at it. And lo and behold, it's nowhere on that paper. So we're thinking, well, she told us for sure we were going to get all property rights back when we paid off the loan. So I whip up this cute little addendum. Here's an addendum to the mortgage. And we say, per the conversation with your loan officer, who acknowledged that upon payoff of this house, we'll get all property rights returned. Please insert this into the mortgage. Now, sound reasonable, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Went to legal, and what did legal say? No.
No changes to the contract.
Correct.
Yep.
So we did not buy the house. And that's when I realized that if you're going to sign a mortgage where you say, I give you all property rights, okay?
Now, what if you have the deed?
You don't get the deed until you're done.
Right, but if you get the deed.
Now, here's what I found out from my friends. We're working on this right now.
Okay.
You have to kill that contract. Once you pay off the house, you have to get them to give you an official document saying that the house is paid off and you're no longer a mortgagee, because that gets them officially off the title.
Right, okay.
Okay. So I'm in a perfect position now when the county assessor sends me a statement to send him one of my cute little letters. Thanks so much for giving me this statement. I so appreciate hearing from you. Now, could you tell me what we've signed that obligates us to pay this? And I bet you $20, I'm going to get a letter back. Statute number 37594 states, and then I'm going to whip up another letter saying, thanks for sharing the info about statute number, blah, 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 which applies to your corporation, I understand. As I'm not a member of your corporation, please send me.
Yeah, I'm going to ask my question again.
I'm going to ask my question again. Thanks so much, appreciatively.
Yeah.
We even got one letter back that says, you failed to understand. that. And so we wrote a letter back saying, I'm sure you think that I failed to understand. I truly do understand. The problem is you still have failed to answer my question.
Right.
So who is failing to understand here? Now, you have to understand that all of these letters in these games that we're playing, and they're really serious games, they go from the little minion who opens the envelope right across the hall to who? Who takes a look at this and tells them what to do?
Well, usually it's a supervisor or a manager, right?
The bar.
Oh, okay.
That's where it will end up.
Oh, okay. I'm taking it. Okay. I'm being really
The county has a bar attorney. The municipality has a bar attorney. The school has a bar attorney. The states, they all have bar attorney. If they're not on their payroll, they have a contract that they take it to the lawyer. Is this legal? Do I have to do this?
Okay.
Every time you run right into that bar.
It's interesting you should bring that up, because when you have these council meetings, there's always the attorney sitting at the end of the table.
You got it.
Always.
Because they look to him to tell them what they can and cannot do.
Yep.
He is telling them what they can and cannot do. So when we write these letters, we have to understand who's going to finally get them.
Right.
And it's true that these bar attorneys are, like Karen Hudis was, they are mind controlled. They actually think this is a legitimate justice system, if you can believe that. So we're going to be waking them up as well. We are going to be waking them up as well and reminding them that they're a corporation. Corporations are bound by the laws of contract. They know this. Now, one person tried this and she got a response back. This city didn't have their own bar attorney. This city hired a firm to send her a threatening letter. You have been notified twice that you were supposed to pay this permit. You're supposed to buy this permit. It's a city ordinance, and you have to pay it, and you have to buy it. And if you don't, it's a misdemeanor if you don't, and you're going to pay penalties. And blah blah blah. Nasty, nasty. So we didn't even answer that because he was just. That's not even worth answering. They can't put a lien on your property, incidentally, without a court action.
Yeah.
So that was just him threatening her. I said, don't waste your time with him. and never heard from him again.
Very interesting. I told you the one situation I had with a red light ticket going back about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I wrote them a letter and I said, because it was like one of their codes or their ordinances, whatever. And I said, I would like you to present the original contract with my signature on it, saying that I agree and I'm obligating myself to, your system of red light cameras.
Right.
Never heard from them again.
Right. Right. I mean, this is going to be, we call it a lawful rebellion.
Yeah.
I like those terms. It's not about bloodshed. We're going after the bar. We're going after the fraud. We don't want to hurt anybody, but we've had enough of this presumptions, presumed. And people say, well, how are they doing it to you? And other people say, well, they're doing it through the birth certificate. They're doing it with a birth certificate. They're making the straw man, and you got to kill the birth certificate. And my answer is, keep sending your letters, because until they admit it, once they admit, well, you're obligated because you have a birth certificate, Mike, then you're home free. That's all
Right.
you do. You send it back and say, where did I agree to allow you to take control of my name and turn it into a corporate fiction? Please tell me who knowingly made that agreement. I just talked to Mom. She said she didn't do it. So who?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, again, that's the basic fraud, right?
It is.
And they're never going to admit that, I don't think. But if they do, we're ready, aren't we?
Right. I mean, they're not going to admit it. This is, like you said, you have to back into it because
Right.
they're not going to start at the beginning so everything unravels.
Right.
Right. So what they're going to do is they're going to say, okay, so let's see if they can make dents down the line. And as they approach the birth certificate, if they get close enough, then, maybe they'll admit something. But their tactic's going to be that, let's see if they figure it out. And it has to be critical mass that figures it out. If it's going to be onesie, twosies, here and there and everything else, they're going to say, you know what? Okay, we have a handful of people out there. They get it. They understand it and everything else. Fine. But still the vast majority of the folks, they haven't a clue. So we can continue on.
Right.
I don't know. Do you agree with that?
I think there's a good likelihood, but I'm a little more hopeful than that, because I realize now that Karen Hudis didn't know it. I realize that Judge Dale, if you read his first book, the U.S. and the Matrix and the U.S. Constitution,
Yeah.
he didn't know it, and he was a judge.
Yeah.
And Melvin Stamper didn't know it. And in the foreword of Melvin Stamper's book is an attorney who was a assistant prosecuting attorney in the state of Florida in 1954 when the UCC came into that state. And all he was told is, oh, it's just a more efficient way to do the legal system, blah, blah, blah. Don't worry about it. Okay? So now he's prosecuting all these UCC statutes and codes. And when he read Melvin Stamper's book in 2008, he felt compelled to write. He said, all those years I never knew what happened until I read this book. He said, and now I'm depressed.
Yeah.
I am severely depressed.
Yeah, it's, when you wake up to it and you understand the depth of the deception, it can be depressing.
It can. And so these lawyers think they're doing the right thing, don't they?
Oh, sure. Sure.
Now, could I read you this one little section, if I can find it here,
Yeah.
which describes the system perfectly? And this was written by Colonel Edward Mendel House. This quote comes out of Melvin Stamper's book, but I've seen it in other places.
This is the famous Colonel House?
Yes, this is
Okay.
the guy. Okay, and the following quote is from Private Papers of Woodrow Wilson. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And this was inserted into this book on page 59. And here it is. Soon every American will be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer not being able to work or earn a living. They will be our chattel, and we will hold the security interest over them forever by operation of the law merchant under the scheme of secured transactions. Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading to us, that is the certificate of live birth. Just so people know what they mean.
There you go.
The bills of lading to us will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, forever to remain economic slaves through taxation secured by their pledges. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designed to make us a profit, and they will be none the wiser, for not one man in a million could ever figure our plans. And if by accident one or two would figure it out, we have in our arsenal plausible deniability. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government, by floating liens and debt to the registrants in the form of benefits and privileges. The registrants are our babies that we're registering. This will inevitably reap to us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations and leave every American a contributor to this fraud, which we will call social insurance, also known as Social Security. Without realizing it, every American will insure us for any loss we may incur. And in this manner, every American will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. The people will become helpless and without any hope for their redemption, and we will employ the high office of the president of our dummy corporation to foment this plot against America.
Wow.
End of quote.
Well,
now,
there you go.
Does that not describe everything we've been talking about?
It's everything. And you know, Anita, it's also just so wicked.
It is.
It's wicked.
It is. They tricked these mothers into filling out this information, and it promptly gets submitted to become a bond. You know, the birth certificate, the straw man is created, and the mother is not the wiser because she's just told she has to do it, and that's that.
Right.
So this is the kind of expose I think Mike will help, because now we're in it, and they made you a corporate fiction with that birth certificate, and now we're going to challenge them.
Yeah, it's just a personification of evil. As you were reading it, you know, he was a very evil guy.
Yeah, he was.
And but you could see that this very evil guy, and he was really, he was a huge player.
Yeah, he was.
In what's going on. I mean, he set the foundation of what everything we're seeing today. And a lot of people, and that's how it works too. A lot of the real powerful, the real movers and shakers are not the ones that are in front of the, as I mentioned before, the curtain.
Right.
He was one of those guys behind the curtain. So that's an incredible piece that you just read. Yeah,
and it is in that book, Melvin Stamper's Fruit from a Poisonous Tree. And you're right. It is very evil. It is subterfuge. They're doing it right now. Now, according to Kieran Hudis, she discovered this, but she had no idea. So they do not teach it to these attorneys in law school. I'm convinced, Mike. They're not taught.
No, too many of them would have a conscience, and they would say, what are you talking about? I'm not a slave. You know, I didn't become a lawyer so that I can enslave my fellow humans. So, you know, you're going to have a lot of people that are going to think that way, and so they can't teach it.
And it's so important to me that people get this, because once they get this, they will figure out they only have the authority to vaccinate the birth certificate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the sooner I get people to understand that, the better off we're going to be. Well, here it is. This is what you own.
Yeah.
You own this. You want to vaccinate it. I'll bring it in. What day? What day do you want me to bring it in?
Stick a hole in the paper. Here you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. I'll even put a little orange underneath it if you want. Yeah. But that kind of thinking, maybe we need to really get people to understand who they have the authority to vaccinate. And it's not you.
Yeah. Wow, this is just unbelievable. I mean, this has been a great conversation, Anita. It really has. I've enjoyed it tremendously.
Me too. You understand so much of this already. It's just really easy to talk to you about this.
I told you I spent a good few years looking into it, researching it, and I had mentioned to you because Anita and I spoke before we had the this call here. We were just chit-chatting, and I had all this knowledge, and I thought to myself, okay, well, now what do I do with it? Because a lot of the problem is that when you act on your own, it's easier for them to stuff you as a lone wolf, a kook, whatever it may be. And that's why, in my view, and I don't know if you agree with this, but we need to achieve some level of critical mass where this is out there to the degree where they start to understand that people are really catching on to the scam. And that's when I think we could turn the ship around. But as long as it's pockets of people here and there, and those pockets of people may get wins, but the thing is that those wins will never get publicized.
Well, we have to remember, though, Mike, I agree with you there, but every step up the ladder that these notices and these letters, every step up the ladder is going to educate people who currently aren't aware of this scam.
Agreed.
It's not just the little guy who generates the notice or generates the letter. So you understand that this is going to go up the ladder.
Right.
And just to give you a quick example, I went to the OSU vet school with my dog, and they handed me this mountain of paperwork. They wouldn't see my dog without all these papers and forms filled out. One of them indicated that I had to agree and consent that if I couldn't pay the whole bill, I would pay them 18% interest. That was their terms and conditions.
Yeah.
And I looked at that, and I drew a line, and I signed it, and boy, the little ladybird came right back and said, "You can't draw lines in this. This is, just to sign these." So I said, well, look, this is an adhesion contract. You are offering your services only if I'm willing to pay 18% and not question. I had been there once before, and they had x-rayed the wrong leg, and I had to fight them over paying for 2 x-rays when all they needed was 1. So I knew that they were capable of charging incorrectly.
Yeah.
I said, you're trying to tell me that I can't dispute any charges that are wrong, and that if something should happen and I can't pay the full amount, I'm willing to pay you 18%.
Yeah.
Or you won't see my poor puppy who's sick. Now, that's called an adhesion contract. Oh, it is not. I said, yeah, it is. No, it's not. I said, it is. Trust me. So she takes it to the business manager. Well, let me check on that. So I'm sitting there. I'm waiting. And it finally, after like an hour, and they still have not taken us back to see the vet, I go to the desk and I say, I'm still waiting. And she said, well, that paper that you didn't want to sign? I said, yeah. She said, they're looking at it in the president's office right now.
Good for you.
Okay, so what did I do? I tipped them off that they've got this situation on the ground that had I not said no, Mike, they would never got that far, would it?
Right. No, you're right. You're right. And I would also ask them, now, I think you need to change the sign outside your veterinary hospital. I think it needs to say Goodfellas or Tony Soprano Veterinary Hospital, because 18%, it's loan sharking.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just amazing. So you're right. As
but
you take it up
possible,
the chain.
And it's possible the president had no idea that some moron down there in the vet school was charging 18%.
Yeah.
See, when you do something like this and it has to go up the ladder, you never know how many people are going to get informed of something that they would never have known. So I'm maybe a little more hopeful that it won't take us all writing letters, but it will take enough letters getting to enough lawyers.
Yeah.
That the lawyers are starting to wake up and say, wait a minute, we never said that. We can't be doing that. Yeah. Why are we doing this, But if we don't complain, the lawyers will never know, will they?
No, they won't know. And that's what I said before, right? I said that a lot of these lawyers are not bad people. As soon as they realize that they're engaged in activities which is actually suppressing and oppressing their fellow man, hopefully they're going to be those that are going to step up and say, wait a minute, this is wrong.
That is my hope.
Yeah.
That is my hope, because like there probably is a lawyer who went to that vet clinic who may have has to sign a paper that he'd pay 18%. That, I don't know, maybe he was just in a hurry and say, well, I'm going to pay it off. I don't need to worry about that. But it sure caught my attention.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for you. You know, you're doing great work, really. I mean, you're really very deep into this.
Well, thank you. I am. I'm mad. I mean, that people should be mad. I'm mad about this. I'm mad that we're turning our children over into this system at birth. This makes me furious.
Yeah.
And we're not even told that's what's going on. I mean, that, goodness sakes, that's horrible.
I first got into this listening. I had told you this offline. I was listening to some Jordan Maxwell lectures years ago.
Right.
And I remember when I first listened to them, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What are they doing with my birth certificate?
Yes.
I'm a slave, you know, and at first it's shocking. You think it's up that can't be true, you know, and then you start researching it more and more.
Right.
And the more you research, you're like, oh my God, it's true.
My God, it's true. But the thing that Jordan doesn't seem to get, he should read Judge Dale.
Yeah.
Send Jordan a copy of Judge Dale. Is that it's all about contracts. And believe it or not, we're agreeing to it. And it is possible to help us learn how not to.
I think
he doesn't get that, does he?
I don't know. I think Jordan now is to the point where he thinks we're just all doomed.
Well, and I think it's because maybe if he read Judge Dale, he would get a better understanding.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think what it is after 50 years of doing this stuff or so that, you know, I think he's looking at his progress report with regard to how much humanity has moved off the dime, and he's assessed that not very far.
That's
so
true.
He's very, very, I think, upset about the fact that he's put a lot of his heart and soul into his work, and he's tried to communicate it. He told me one time, he said, you know, Mike, he said, it's interesting. People like to hear me talk. He says, and I try to explain to them the way this stuff works. And he says, and then I'm thinking to myself, for most people, this is just entertainment. After the seminar, the lecture, or the YouTube clip ends, they go off and they continue doing whatever it is they were doing before they watched me. He goes, but in the meantime, I'm the one who's got the focus, the spotlight, and catching heat for this.
Right.
And I won't go into much detail, but I will say that in my discussion with Jordan, he had said that he did indeed was catching heat for talking about this stuff.
Well, and I understand that, and I haven't caught that much yet, but I would not be surprised if I catch it.
Yeah.
But again, what choice have they left? You know, from a personal point of view, I have two choices. I can either accept that they're going to vaccinate me and my grandchildren, and you know, our future is pretty grim, and consent. This time it really there's only two choices left at this moment in time. You either consent or you don't.
Right.
Very few situations do I see as black and white, but this time it's black and white.
Yeah.
You either consent or you don't. And if you don't consent, then start reading things like Lawfully Yours, start educating yourself, listen to some of the ideas we're talking about, and think about ways not to consent, for goodness sakes.
Right. And the whole fact that you have to think that way says that you're a slave. They view you as a slave. You either do it or there's going to be repercussions.
Correct.
So you cannot claim to be a free person. You cannot claim to be sovereign. You can't claim to be whatever it is you think you in your mind that you are from a freedom perspective, and then be confronted with that choice. Either do it or there's going to be trouble.
Right.
So you better do it, because if you don't do it, we're going to make your life really difficult, and we're going to make your life very miserable.
Well, and I do think people have imaginations. I know you agree that we do have creative imaginations, and one of them was a simple letter to the school saying, my son Jimmy Doe doesn't fit the description of those who the SB 277 applies to. He's not a corporation.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, please put this exception in your file. Okay?
Yeah.
Is that hard? That's easy.
Right.
And, of course, because they created Catch-22, we got to throw a Catch-22 back. And the Catch-22 they've created is that they've created compulsory education. So if Jimmy Doe doesn't go to school, they're going to try to prosecute you for violating their compulsory laws. So right in the letter, we added, I understand that California has laws regarding compulsory education, and if you won't admit Jimmy or Joey to the school, then please give me a letter stating why you won't do that, so I won't be subject to punishment for your decision not to let Joey in your school. Thanks so much, appreciatively. So what we did there is basically we threw the catch-22 back at them, and we created a catch-22 for them. You cannot have a law of compulsory education and then have a law that says I've got to have Joey stuck with unwarranted pharmaceutical products. Okay? That's a catch-22 for me. So just flip that puppy and we'll give it back to you.
So basically you're saying that you can't have one contingent upon the other when the first one is not valid to begin with.
That's right. And that's also, it would void a contract because it's coercion. If you go and get lawfully yours and you look at the definition of contracts, coercion nullifies a contract.
Okay.
And that's the kind of thinking that I'm hoping we can get people to start doing, you know. But I do think they're going to have to build, and you can tell me anytime you think I'm wrong, build from their understanding of contract law. Where are they coercing you? And we even have a little checklist there for people to look at. You know, there's 6 components for a lawful contract, okay? So where are you being coerced? Because when they do that, okay, then the contract cannot be enforced.
Right.
Because they're breaking their own rules about enforceable contracts. So this is the kind of thinking. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know that I have all the answers. I'm just trying to get people to look at this from a point of view that it's all about corporate contracts.
It is, and your website, Anita, your Anti-Corruption Society, and all of this information is there.
Yep. Sure is.
Yeah, there's an unbelievable amount of information. So, but look, I want to just say thank you so much. This was a great, great discussion. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. I did too. I think it's great. We understand a lot of this at the same moment. That's refreshing for me.
Yeah, and I'm learning, you know, from you. And I did start reading Lawfully Yours, and I'm about halfway through it. A lot of it I am familiar with because I did read Judge Dale's stuff a few years back. But it's still good to have the refresher.
Yeah, it really is.
Because you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that, you know. So I was doing that a couple of times as I was reading through it.
Yeah, and people need to keep it handy because if they do ever get contacted for jury duty or, you know, you can always thumb through that, and he has ways to handle summons and citations.
Yeah.
And, you know, just keep it handy so you'll know what to do should you receive any of those.
Yeah, no, it's great. It really is. Well, Anita, I know I have kept you on this call way too long. I didn't mean to have you spend so much time talking with me, but it's been a great conversation.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
And you need to come back. Come back anytime, and we can just catch up on stuff and talk about it some more. I think that we're going to get a lot of people very interested in the show, and I'm going to point them to your website and to the work that you guys have done.
Great. Thank you.
And we're going to spread the word.
Okay, thanks so much.
All right, Anita.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. And that concludes my interview with Anita Whitney, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Anita's website is www.anticorruptionsociety.com. Please see the show notes below for additional links. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sageofquayradio.blogspot.com or simply head over to our hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.
I'm packing my bags, and I'm out of here. Bitches to ride. This place is surreal. Nobody cares. It has no feel. Just blank stares. I'm tired of all the hate. I'm tired of all the dysfunction. I'm tired of being tired. I'm leaving dystopia. I'm not a slave, so please go away. I won't behave. I don't care what you say. I don't sleepwalk or crawl on my knees. And I don't sheep talk, so you can be pleased. I'm tired of all the hate. I'm tired of all the dysfunction. I'm tired of being tired. I'm leaving dystopia. I'm packing my bags, and I'm out of here. Bitches to rags, can't live in fear. This place is surreal.